Got it. Welcome, Comadres. I'm Eileen Schlepp, one of the coordinators of Las Comadres monthly speaker series, and I work along with Maria Ferrer, who's here tonight. The goal of the speaker series is to motivate and inspire our comadres and introduce the works of accomplished Latinas in various industries. Before we start, I'd like to ask everyone to put yourselves on mute. And if you have any questions or comments, please put them in the chat room and we will try to get to them. Now, please welcome our tonight's speaker, somebody I've always admired, Abigail Golden-Vásquez, who will be speaking to us about strengthening Latino leadership. Abigail is a Senior Strategy Prosperity Now Fellow and an expert in equitable economic advancement, Latino entrepreneurships and international affairs and communications. She has a global history. She was executive director of the Aspen Institute Latinos in Society program from 2015 to 2020. A major accomplishment of her tenure was founding the Forum on Latino Business Growth. So get ready to have a very exciting journey tonight. Interviewing Abigail will be our Dr. Nora de Hoyos Comstock. She's our national and international founder of Las Comadres para las Americas. And this networking and support organization she launched now serves over 10,000 plus Latino women in more than 65 cities and 28 states, including Puerto Rico. Nora is also on the board of trustees for the Austin Community College and has been recognized for her work by several organizations, including AARP and Girl Scouts of Central Texas. Comadre Nora, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Eileen. I am so excited about this interview. I actually met Abigail. If you're going to say it in Spanish, it's Abigail.
Abigail.
Abigail. Let's go to Abigail. Porque si no lo voy a decir mal. But I actually met her through Austin Community College as a trustee, and I started receiving information from the Aspen Institute, and I saw Golden-Vásquez, and I was like, I'm going to find out more about this woman. And so I did. And it has been absolutely, a very exciting journey, because at that time she was still part of the Aspen Institute. And Abigail, it's a pleasure to have this opportunity to really learn from you about the impactful work that you've been engaged in around the world. As a young child, I dreamed of that type of job. And we know you best for this important work as the founding ED of the Latinos in Society program at the Aspen Institute. And I'm pleased that we can chart a career that enlightens the path someone can take to such a career. And we want to know if that path is something you planned or an opportunity that turned into a career path. But actually, before launching into that conversation, let's start at the beginning and tell us about your upbringing and your education and how you came to be in a place and a space to step into the first job that led you down this path.
Well, thank you for that excellent question, and I will respond to it. Thank you, Comadre Nora. The journey of getting to know you has also been wonderful, and we're engaging in some other circles around the Las Comadres work, and I'm happy to be part of a class that you all have put on. So thank you so much for all you do for Latinas, for our community. And thank you, Eileen, for that wonderful introduction. And I'm just so happy to be here with all of you comadres. Thank you for taking time out of your evening to spend with us. And I knew that it would be an enjoyable and wonderful conversation. So I'm super happy to be here. And thank you again for the invitation, really honored. So I am a little bit of an unusual product, West Side Story, but a little differently. Born in New York City, I'm already third generation Puerto Riqueña. My grandparents came over from Puerto Rico My grandmother was a seamstress, and my grandfather worked in the chiclets factory for 40 years. And then after he retired, he worked as at a janitor in a fast food restaurant. So these are hardworking people, and who came over. I would say the American dream, but the American dream belongs to everyone in the continent now of Latin America and the Caribbean. And on my father's side, I'm half Jewish and half Puerto Rican, and my father also comes from immigrants, but they had a bit of a different trajectory. My grandfather came over from Ukraine, actually. And a town called Chernovitz or Chernovici. And he took a cart full of material and sold out of this cart at Union Square in New York, and eventually grew to have 3 stores on Union Square: a liquor store, a fabric store, and another store. I don't know what it was. So two very different trajectories, but both immigrant stories. My parents' marriage was not one that I think either family was very happy about. And so that was interesting. And my parents ultimately divorced, but I feel like my Puerto Rican family was afraid that my mother would be taken advantage of. And I think my Jewish family was concerned that marrying a Puerto Rican was going to be a step down. And or were concerned that my mother was after their money. My grandfather, not so much, my grandmother. So I'm giving you that context because it really informs a lot of what motivated me in my life. I saw the hard work of both sides of my family. And I also, what it means to make something of yourself as an immigrant. But I also, I think I had a little bit of something to prove. I really wanted to prove my grandparents wrong. And so I knew at a very early age that I was going to go to college. And I also knew at a very early age that I was going to learn Spanish, because it seemed insane to me as early as 5 years old that I couldn't communicate well with my grandparents. My grandparents didn't speak English very well. I didn't speak Spanish, and I would spend time with them. And I was just kind of at a loss for words. So I knew very, very young that I was going to go somewhere and learn to speak Spanish. To me, I knew that meant I had to travel. I had to be immersed. So fast forward ahead many years, I had the blessing of getting into Amherst College, which I think really put me on a certain type of trajectory. And I had a crossroads where I could have gone to UC Santa Cruz and had a full scholarship, or I could go to Amherst College and have a partial scholarship, but still leave with a lot of debt. And when I was making that decision, I said, I think I'll always ask myself, could I have done it? Could I have made it? And I thought I have to at least try, or I'll always have that question hanging over. So went to Amherst College. Part of the reason I picked Amherst was because they had a very high participation rate of international exchange programs. So I knew that I would be able to study abroad, and that would not be a liability in any kind of way. So I knew I wanted to have international experiences and possibly have an international career. Fast forward, I studied abroad in Spain. It was a revelation to me. It was a life-changing experience. If anyone has ever done that, when you get up at a young age, but sort of as a young adult, it's almost like not reinvent yourself exactly, but you can really come into the you that you want to be without the assumptions of who you are. You're starting from zero and presenting yourself, and in a very humbling kind of way. In my case, in a language that was not my first language, and I wasn't super comfortable in, and had to learn. So learning Spanish in Spain was also eye-opening, because I grew up hearing Puerto Rican Spanish, which is, in my mind, very affectionate, very cariñoso, very sing-songy. And in Spain, it was like harsh, harsh, harsh. And when I first got there, I was like, who are these people? They're not Latinos. They're so harsh. But I stuck it out and ended up making lifelong friends, people I'm still in touch with today. So once I set foot in another country and had a living experience, and ultimately was a year long experience, I got the travel bug, as it were. And I knew that I wanted a career in international relations. And so I'm going on and on and on. So, Comadre Nora, tell me if I've answered your question and you'd like to go on to another one, or whether you want me to continue to how I got to the position that I have now.
I'd like you to continue, because I think it informs a lot of how our youth get where we're going, or might get where they're going. So go ahead, please.
Okay. So I had all of the applications ready to apply to master's programs in international relations, because honestly, I had nobody in my family that had an international career. I didn't know what that looked like. I didn't know how to get there, but I figured if you study international relations, then you'll figure that out, right? So I was all set to do that. Echo now. I applied to, I had all the applications ready to go for 4 schools, went back to Spain with all my savings from having worked all summer, and ended up teaching English for a year in Spain instead of coming home, which was also something that many of us don't get to do. And I'm being very intentional about sharing that story, because my father, when I called him and said, I'm not coming home, I got a job at a school, I have friends, an apartment. He said, what are you doing? You've always been so responsible. You have, college debt. What are you doing? This is so not like you. And I said, Papi, if I don't do this now, when will I ever do it in my life? Ever. And I guess that convinced him. So he sent me a couple boxes of my winter clothes, and I stayed and did that. Went back to New York, worked for a marketing company for almost a year, and then reapplied to all the schools that I was already going to apply for. So within a year, I was like, okay, how am I going to get into this international career? And so went back to the schools, ended up going to Johns Hopkins SAIS, School for Advanced International Studies. I got into American University too. I was waitlisted at SAIS, but I got into their Bologna program. And my philosophy was, if I have to go back to graduate school, work really hard, why not learn another language and live in another country? And they had a program in Italy. So I did that. And I had this idea that I was going to work in international development for the rest of my life and my entire career. I got an amazing job out of grad school at a company called Development Alternatives, Inc. They're what's known around here as a Beltway bandit. And I don't mean that in the bad sense, in the good sense, but they're a company that's a contractor that provides services to the government. And in this case, to USAID. And I had an amazing opportunity to work on a program that focused on micro enterprise development. And I ran conferences around the world, sharing best practices after 10 years of micro enterprise lessons learned. So I got right out of grad school, and I got to travel to Egypt, to Kenya, and to Peru. And that just blew my mind. I was like, this is what I was meant to do. Did that for a while. And then it was time to move on. And I actually missed my home state and city of New York City. I really, at the time, didn't love Washington, D.C., but I loved the work. And I had this tremendous opportunity to go to New York and work for a public relations agency in New York. And I was hired to help them open their Latin America practice. And when I didn't mention this, but even though I went to Italy, I studied Latin American studies. So that was my focus. I did intend to work in Latin America specifically. So to have this opportunity to help build and start a new business in this PR agency focused on Latin America was just tremendous. And I was able to work with Embraer, which is a Brazilian manufacturer of aircraft, and FEMSA, Reebok's Human Rights Program, the Netherlands Foreign Investment Agency. So it was really, really great experience. Really fun, really hard, but excellent. And then I was like, well, here I am. I'm in New York. I'm working on all these clients. I'm not using my language really. And I'm not living or working in foreign countries. Like everything I did was domestic. And so a couple of years had passed. It was like 3 or 4 years. And I was like, well, this is not exactly the international career that I had hoped for. Plus, I wanted to have the giving back piece. And I'm raising this too, because I think that's also always been a component of my career path and trajectory. There's 3 things that have guided me. What can I learn? How can I contribute? And where will this, is it going to be fun? Is there going to be something like I want to do? So it hasn't been the way most people do it, where they're like, okay, I want a position as a, COO in X company. And to do that, first I have to have this job, then I have to have this job, then I have to have this job. I've never been that strategic, to be honest. Just haven't. I've always looked for opportunities that where I can grow, where I can learn, and where I can contribute. And contribute by giving back. Everyone can contribute in their job by what they do, of course, and everyone should be proud of that. My specific thing, though, has always been working on things where you give back. So even when I was at the PR agency, I said no to some clients that I didn't think were things that I would be proud to work on. And, I worked on human rights campaign. I worked on foreign trade. Like I was blessed to be able to have those kinds of opportunities, and also to be supported to say no sometimes. So go ahead. You look like you want to.
Well, and I wanted to ask, the opportunities that came up, how did you find them? Were you lucky? Were you at the right place at the right time? Were you looking for them? How did that particular, these jobs come about?
In every instance, I was looking. I think, when I believe in putting intentionality out in the universe. And with the exception of one, and, that comes later in my life, and I'm happy to share that. That's how I ended up with basically starting the Latinos in Society program. But for the first job, I networked. I was here in DC. Talked to a lot of people, did a lot of informational interviews, and then I found out about this, what was started as a consulting opportunity with DAI and turned into a real position. When I decided it was time for me to go back to New York, that was the first move. And to be honest, I also broke up with my Italian boyfriend, and I was like, that was what was keeping me in DC. So I was like, okay, I'm free. And I can go back to New York. And so I started looking for opportunities at my school, and there was another graduate of SAIS who did Middle Eastern studies. And so we were talking, and she said, I can teach you PR. You have the language and the understanding of Latin America. So you bring that and I'll teach you the rest. So of course I was brought along. Someone invested in me. Someone took the time to teach me, but the job itself, I found through the school on one of the job boards. And then this is really interesting, how I got to Honduras. So my next job after the Reuter Finn, which was a public relations agency, and I worked there for 4 years, and I eventually ran the public affairs practice there. That's when I had this sort of revelation about I need to live abroad again. And one of my former employees had gone back to work at USAID in Ukraine. And so she told me, when I told her I was looking and, wanted to know what she thought of USAID and all of that. And she said, Hurricane Mitch just happened and there's an opening that you might be interested in. And I remember I applied over a weekend. And then for those of you who are younger here, this might sound foreign to you, but I remember faxing like a 20-page application to Honduras. And I was interviewed and got a job without even meeting anyone face to face.
On the phone, interviewed on the phone?
Yeah, on the phone. And so within 4 weeks or 6 weeks, I was on a plane and I was doing the in-country communications program for the US government on the whole reconstruction effort. And at the time, it was the largest hurricane reconstruction effort or disaster assistance effort ever. Unfortunately, since then, there have been many more bigger ones, but so it was a really exciting time and an exciting experience and an opportunity and to give back. And so when I left there, I said, I don't want to do corporate anymore right now in my life. I want to continue to do international, but I want to do it in a way that's more in the social sector. So I decided not to go back to New York, where I feel is very, was much more corporate, and DC is much more, well, it's just a broad array from political to development to, and so I moved back to DC. That was more than 20 years ago. Haven't looked back twice. Love it. Raising my family here. And then I worked for the German Marshall Fund, US-European relations for doing communications, congressional relations, and all of that for about 4 years. And then the life-changing opportunity was going to work for Aspen Institute, working on their global leadership initiative. So after 16 plus years in public relations, I said, okay, I don't want to just tell other people's stories now. I want to be on the side of making the stories. And so I saw an opportunity at Aspen, had an incredible network from a fellowship program I participated in. And this is something I want to share too. I have taken advantage of leadership opportunities so I'm a National Hispana Leadership Institute Executive Fellow, and I'm a International Career Advancement Program Fellow. So as these things, I learned about them, and I encourage you to learn about things in your sector, because there's similar things in PR and all kinds of sectors. Learned about those professional development opportunities and participated in them. Gained incredible networks, saw an incredible opportunity for the Global Leadership Initiative at Aspen Institute. And I'm not kidding, about 5 or 10 people called people they knew at Aspen Institute to support my candidacy. I feel like my boss couldn't say no because so many people were like, oh, Abigail, yes, she's great. You have to hire her. So I'll stop there.
Okay, well, because we're about to go into the Aspen Institute.
Okay.
But really what I want to focus the conversation on, it's fascinating. I could just listen to you all day long, because that's the life I wanted to lead. I want your life, and I can't start over. So I guess I'm going to live vicariously through all of you that are able to achieve these amazing things. But what I want to know is kind of from this vantage point that you have, I want to focus in on how does the Latino community advance? I want you to bring in your Aspen amazing experience and what you were able to do there, and the amazing leaders and people that you were able to connect with and interact with. But in all of this, you have framed an image, a picture of a framework of where the Latino community is right now. And what I'd like to engage you in is helping us to understand this place and space in time, and how we can move forward to offer the opportunities. Like you went out there and you took life by the whatevers, right? And you made it happen. We have to do that for our kids as well. Yeah. Our community has to come together. What are the challenges, given all this perspective that you have and the leaders that you've interacted with? What do you see? What advice? Where do we go? How do we pull it together to be at the table?
Yeah. Wow, that's a tough question, Comadre Nora. First of all, I'm going to disagree with you and say it's never too late. There's always a way. It just may be a little bit different. I mean, you could go take a course when you retire, and we hope you don't do that soon. You can go take a course and live, 2-3 months in Guatemala or in Mexico. My aunt did this. You can, take a course, take a language class, choose to rent an apartment for a couple months and just get up and go and do it. Who knows what you'll experience? Remember, it was my taking a leap of faith and going to Spain that led me on this path. And once you know you can do it, then then you can do it, right? So I'm going to support you. We'll talk offline. If you really want this, if this is really your dream, we'll make it happen. Then in terms of the big questions that you asked me, I'll just say, first of all, it's worth explaining how the hell did I get into the Latino world after all of this global stuff that I told you about in public relations. One of my first jobs that I didn't mention was working for a Spanish radio station in New York City after I got back from Spain. And I remember I was laughing because my dad would say, "What do you do?" And I would say, "I sell air." I was selling airtime for a Spanish radio station. He's like, "You sell air?" "Yeah, I sell air, papi. I sell air." So anyway, back then, I'm scared to say, like 30, 40 years ago or something, we were making the case to corporations that you have to invest in and support this market that was growing and was going to be so important. We had no idea that it was going to get as big as it did, as fast as it did, even then. But we were making that case. So I was at Aspen Institute, I'll be really frank, and I was looking around. This was a premier organization of the United States focused on the good society. That was their mission, creating the good society, developing leaders. And I did not see anything focused on Latinos. Zero. I was the only Latina, executive there. I became a vice president. I was the deputy director of the Aspen Global Leadership Network. I helped develop these, develop out almost like a franchise model for the leadership programs around the world. Loved it. It was great. But I was looking around and I thought, this institution that I love so much is going to miss the boat if they don't start to think about Latinos. So I started to just kind of say, why aren't we doing more with Latinos? I was on the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion committee, and I co-chaired it. And I said, well, if you guys aren't going to do it, I'm going to start doing my own programming. So I started just putting on programming. I screened Harvest of Empire and then interviewed the director. And I just did these different programs. And then I did NHLI, the National Hispanic Leadership, Institute. And I think that put on the radar of leadership that I was someone who was trying to advance myself. So that's another little side note recommendation there. When you do these things, it catches the attention of leadership. So be careful what you complain about, or be careful what you wish for, because finally, the Aspen Institute actually did decide to start a program. They raised some seed money and recruited Monica Lozano, who I don't know if you know her, but she's an amazing executive leader on some of the biggest corporate boards, ran a major media empire, really did a lot of work for Unidos US. She was the chair of the board at one point. So they got her to come over and share it. And so I was like, oh, finally you're here. We needed this so badly. I'm so glad that Aspen's going to do this. And she said, why don't you lead it? And I was like, oh, no. I'm just happy that it's here and I've been doing this and that. And she said, no, I need someone who knows Aspen. And she said, I know the Latino community. And so I'll introduce you to everyone you need to know. And we're going to build this together, but I don't know how Aspen works, and you can bring that to the table. So that's how I got to start to work on Latino issues. Not that I was absolutely clueless, but definitely didn't have the chops or the credentials in the field without Monica's support. So that was incredible. And so over time, I guess I already knew this, but I was like, how is it that we are such a big percentage of the population and growing, and we have so little influence or so underrepresented on so many boards? So part of it, boards, corporations, you name it, you can go across almost any sector in law, in judgeships, whatever. With some extraordinary exceptions, like Justice Sonia Sotomayor. Of course, we have the exceptions, but it's just not nearly the right mix of representation. So we realize that we have to change the narrative. We have to tell our stories. We have to uplift the accomplishments of Latinos. I believe strongly that we can't, it's important to know the truth of our circumstances, but we can't sell a misery story. If we sell a misery story, no one wants to be involved. We have to tell the success stories, to laud our strengths, to celebrate our accomplishments, of which there are so many. So that was one part of our mission. The other part was to work on civic participation, educational advancement, and economic advancement. I soon realized we can't do all three of those things well, and we would have to hone in on where we had the best advantage. And the Aspen Institute has a lot of economic programs, but they weren't doing much on Latinos at all. There was like this whole diversity thing, but they weren't really talking specifics. So that's what I ended up really focusing on. I think that's to reach power, we need to have economic success. And so that's where, even to this day, I believe we need to place our big bets. We need to get stronger as an economic power because money is influence. There are other things we need to do, which is come together as communities, stop breaking down into Cubano, Chicano, Puerto Riqueño. We are all Latinos, whether you speak Spanish or not, whether you are Black, yellow, brown, white, we're all together. We will only be stronger together. So I think we have to come together, get united, speak with one voice, and speak to our power, and speak to our what the assets that we bring to this country.
And so how do you, given again this plethora of experience, how do you see us doing that? Because we are divided, and we do this Mexicano, Peruvian, Puerto Rican, whatever it might be. And, that happens in Las Comadres, believe it or not. This, like the Cuban group is over here, or the Puerto Rican group is over here. No, we are all in this together, but we keep dividing. What have you seen anything that brings us together?
I think that there is a growing consciousness of Latinidad. I've seen that, again, I go back 40 years in this space. And I see an increasing acceptance of that and an increasing understanding of that as a strength. That does not mean that we don't continually do it and continually tear it down and continually, there are those that do that and will always do that. But I think we have to stay focused on the prize and stay focused. And one of the first things you can do is, when you see that group of Cubanos over there, is walk over and be a part of it. We have to be courageous. We have to cross those lines. And, I believe leadership is always by example.
That's great. Really, I love that. And we do that in Las Comadres a lot. We try to break all that down. And so, yes. And then what about involvement with other communities, our allies? How do you see us working with allies to help? Two questions. Let me break that down a little bit more. Our numbers, right? We are 30% of the population.
We're going to be 30% of the population by 2060. We're 1/5 of the population today. So that's 1 in 5 Americans, people. Like we have that, and that is a power, but it is not a guarantee.
Right.
People always say, "Oh, demographics are destiny." Demographics are not destiny, because look at, you could have a completely marginalized group. This is what traveling abroad has taught me. You can have a majority of people that are extremely poor, led by a minority of people who are clamping down on the rest of society. So there's no guarantee that just because we have the numbers, we're going to get the power. That's why I keep talking about the economic piece of this. And also, we've got to get unified. We have to get unified. Because our numbers don't mean anything. If you want to focus on the number piece, which I think there's a strong case to be made for it, there's just no guarantee. If we keep splitting up, that dilutes our power.
It does. And part of, I watched an interview you did with Sotomayor, with Justice Sotomayor, which was excellent. And of course, the conversation was around civic engagement, but civic engagement wasn't, and this is key to everything that we talk about. It's not just voting, right? It's not just about voting. And it's also not, because I would go knock on doors trying to get people to vote in the local elections and say, oh no, it's not a presidential year, I'm not voting.
Yeah.
And he was like, no, the local is really, really important. It starts at the local level. So this whole idea of our numbers in terms of voting strength, if we can get people to vote locally, that's where the civic engagement really makes a difference. And then of course you keep going in the voting. But what are your thoughts about this civic engagement and getting our community involved in doing more locally?
Yeah, thank you. It's a good question. And that was, I mentioned that we started out with that as a key focus and focused on that for 2 years. And it's incredibly important. And the reason that we stepped back from doing that work is because there's just so many good organizations out there doing it. We didn't want to duplicate, and we didn't want to step on anyone else's toes. But we had the honor of convening some of the great organizations working on Latino engagement and civic engagement specifically, and had the opportunity to bring them together and really dig deep into what is needed to activate. And I think we published a report called Unleashing Latino Civic Power. And what our colleagues, from Unidos US and LULAC and all, many of our leading civic organizations said was just what you said. Local elections are important too, but it's also more than that. It's more than even voting. It's more than local elections. It's involving in the school board. It's writing to your mayor or to your city council member. It's any host of things that engage in community. And we had some really interesting discussions about how we engage in community differently, and it doesn't get counted. So you may not know this, but there's this whole idea that Latinos don't participate civically and they don't donate or give money, right? Right? That is a myth. And the reason it's a myth is because people who are collecting this kind of data, they don't count the giving in churches. They don't count the meals that are taken to a neighbor. They don't count the watching of somebody else's children. Things that we do that are incredibly civic focused, but not counted the same way. We count it as charity, giving to a charity. We count it as, so if you're not counting what exists, you're not going to know. So again, debunking myths is really important as well. That's part of telling the story. That's part of telling us as an asset community. We take care of each other and we take care of others. My mother hated it when she was young, but her neighbor was a merchant marine. The mother died. My grandparents took in his child when he was on sea. They didn't have money. This was not another Latino, by the way. This was a young Jewish girl. And my mother had to grow up with this sister she didn't want to grow up with because of that. That's the kind of thing we do.
Right. And that is so true, that whenever you think of philanthropy, you don't think about the doing, which we do so much of. And like you said, the church tithing and the support of the church that we do. And what about now? We're talking about economic development. We're talking about small businesses. We're talking about growing our economic power. What sorts of things have you seen, and things that the Aspen Institute is doing and that others can support? What sorts of things are going on in that arena that you can lift up?
Yeah. So this is a passion of mine. It has become a passion of mine. I learned something that blew my mind, and I had the tremendous opportunity to do something about it. I learned that Latinos start businesses at 2 to 3 times any other population. So we are the generators of new business. We are we were the ones who helped get us out of the last recession. I mean, not solely, I'm not trying to take all the credit, but
Right.
we had an outsized influence, let's just say, on the recovery. But our businesses start and stay small. So LBAN, Latino Business Action Network, estimates that $1.47 trillion are unrealized or opportunity cost, because Latino-owned businesses do not grow at the same rates as like white-owned businesses. So we're not comparing apples and oranges. We're not comparing large businesses with small businesses or tech companies to, construction companies. We're talking about like businesses. If we could just capture that, just imagine what we'd contribute to the economy, not just our families and our communities. So this seemed like this was something I could get very excited about. And that's what led us to creating the Forum on Latino Business Growth, which was very focused on scaling Latino-owned businesses. So I think there's tremendous potential. Another thing that we should be tremendously proud of, and I already know that lots of comadres are already doing this, is we are entrepreneurial. We're very entrepreneurial.
Yes.
And so that is a superpower. And we just need to get the resources, the know-how, the connections, the capital, the access to markets, the access to supply chains, and access to the tools that others have to get our businesses to grow and to thrive. So very passionate about this. I think it is a tremendous opportunity for our communities, and just yet another way that we contribute.
Well, and I was thinking there are a lot of programs that I have seen in Austin, for example. I'm not sure about other cities, but I can only imagine it's replicated many other places. And yet people are not taking advantage of them. Did you notice this? And if you did, what solutions have you heard of?
Well, it is tough. And I can actually say that I am a victim of the same thing, that not a victim, but I am a perpetrator of the same thing I'm going to say. One of the things that the data has shown is that we don't like to ask for help. There's a bit of shame in what we don't know. And also there's a lack of the information of what's out there. It's not actually reaching community. And I've found that it can be a problem of language. I don't like to assume or presume that that Spanish language is always the problem. It's not. Most business owners have some English. And if they don't, I mean, then, it's hard to know about these programs, but they're also entrepreneurship serving organizations that specifically focus on Latinos, and some do speak Spanish. But I think it's that connection to where people are. Like, are you getting into community? And if not, how is community going to know about what you're doing? So this morning I heard Janice Boldler speak. She's the first Latina and first person ever to hold this new position on diversity, equity, and inclusion and opportunity that was created at Treasury. I'm sure that's not the exact title, but that's basically what she's doing. And they have set aside billions, with a B, billions of dollars. I think it's like $10 billion in multiple different programs. Like one is 1.7 billion, another one's 3.5 billion. And then there's another one that's about to be released soon. And they're focused on Black and brown businesses. And her concern was, we've released all this money, we're sending it to the states. How are we going to make sure that Black and brown businesses know how to access? And so she said to the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce session that I was at today, we need the U.S. Hispanic Chambers to, basically, we need to create a playbook that helps them reach the communities that actually need this funding. And so I think there can be some communication gaps, and it's not only for our community. It probably happens to the African-American community and Native, to Black communities. And also, even, I think, we don't always like to admit it, but poor white communities also have real information gaps. Look at Appalachia. Look at, we spend a lot of time in West Virginia, and there's huge information gaps on access to resources, tools, and government programs.
Well, I think one of the biggest issues that we have about all of this is communication. And I know it's to figure out, how do we get it down to the lowest common denominator? Okay. Do we knock on doors? Do we go to churches? Do we, how do we really identify those pockets where really they do have, whether it's 200 people or 1,000 people that attend those churches or events. But I think it's going to take us who have that information to make sure that we get it out there, that we call, that we knock on the door to the church, that we do whatever, because it is really, really difficult to get information out there, and misinformation. Good Lord, heaven knows what kind of misinformation could be out there about this. But if we don't participate in it, it doesn't get out there. The money does not get used, and we all lose.
Yeah. Yes. I just say yes to what you just said. And then I'll add one more thing. And then I'm noticing these, I can't read them myself, but I'm noticing there's some comments popping up or questions popping up. And I want to make sure we get some time to hear from Comadres what their questions are. You may have already been asking them, I don't know. But in any case, what I'm doing now at Prosperity Now, among other things, is we're focused as an intermediary organization. We're focused on working with the organizations that work on the ground. So we're focused on helping them to do what they do so well. Many of them are strapped for resources. Many of them are strapped for training or lack capacity, not due to any fault of their own, but it's very, very difficult. And they're trying to serve so many people with so little. And so that's the space that we're in. I often find that there's a missing middle. Even in the entrepreneurship work we were doing, people are down there helping like the micro, and people are putting big VC money into the big high tech. But in the middle, these people are just, there's like nowhere to go. There's people who are left out. It's increasing that there's more and more organizations out there. But like you said, the information. So another thing we're looking at is aggregating, having like a one-stop shop where every type of capital you need, you would be able to find it in one place. But even then you have to get the information and push people to the site. It's always a challenge. But I do think that it can look so daunting and overwhelming if you're thinking about, how do I reach the 50 million or 60 million Latinos out there? But if you think about reaching the organizations that are working with them, and then it becomes a different equation. Then you dramatically reduce who you have to reach out to, and then you train and teach and support them, like Janice said, with playbooks and with support, and then send them out. I always think of the promotora model.
Yes,
right.
Absolutely. Not only does it work in health, it works in lots of other areas as well. Well, for example, if you took a promotora or a group or an organization goes to an apartment complex, and on a Saturday morning or whatever time works out for that particular complex, if you find out when are most people there, the moms or the dads or the people who are looking for work, if we go at that time, you have a chance of getting that community to learn more about the opportunities, both education and training and, financing that's available for them to use. So we just have to be, I think, more creative about how we, the organizations that are already out there, how we work with them to get this out. Okay.
I mean, you have a great platform too yourself, Nora. I mean, 10,000 women are part of Las Comadres. So imagine that as a distribution.
Yes.
No.
Yeah. And we have to figure out ways to encourage them to get out and do that. So let's work on that together. But one of the questions was, she said, how were you able to connect or network with folks to become sponsors and mentors? That this is a challenge that they encounter regularly.
So I'll tell you that it was really late in life. I felt like I had a difficult time finding sponsors and mentors. However, I look back now and I realize that people were sponsors and mentors, and I didn't see it or realize it at the time. So I wasn't super intentional about it. And again, for a long time in my career, I would say I was shy or humble or afraid to ask for things. I alluded to that earlier. And I think I'm probably still like that to this day. But I have been able to step into opportunities as they arise. I will say that. So I mean, I was lucky to have some, I always felt like, well, I haven't had somebody who kind of like plucked me out and said, here, I'm going to guide you on this career path to the success that you want. It never worked that way for me. Most of my moving up in the world, I mean, I've gotten promotions, but most of it has been changing organizations, looking for that next thing. And it's not always been that way. I definitely got promotions, working. I mean, it's the basic stuff that we all do and know. Work hard, be reliable, be honest and transparent, be, accounted upon, all of those things. But I mean, what Monica did for me is definitely mentoring, right? She opened doors for me. She introduced me to people that I needed to know. She helped put her name on things to get people to show up for the things that we wanted to do. So that was not a traditional mentorship. She wasn't like telling me this is how you become a good speaker and this is how you become a good leader. But she was helping me to pave the path. And there've been others, like that throughout my career, like the woman early on in my career who said, okay, you speak Spanish, you know the culture, you've studied Latin America, I'll teach you PR, and you bring what you bring to the table, right?
Yeah. And that is, in essence, a coach, right? A kind of a coach.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, she was my supervisor, and I wouldn't say she sat me down. In reality, she didn't sit me down and say, this is how you write a press release. This is how you do this. I've never had that. I was industrious. I worked hard. If I didn't know how to write a press release, I would look up, do a search and look up what a press release looked like, and then I would emulate it. But someone willing to take a chance on you, someone who brings you into the fold, opens a door, gives you, that opportunity. I've seen a lot of stuff on mentorship, and I've seen a lot about advice about mentorship. So, one thing is like the onus is on the mentee to reach out, to follow up, to stay in touch, not just when you want something, but when you want to be helpful to them. It's almost like a friendship. I'm sort of shy, actually, so I never want to trouble people, but I've learned over time.
It's so Latino of you.
I know, it's terrible, but I learned over time, even small things. So like with Monica, like if I saw an article that was relevant to the company that she used to run, I would forward it to her. Like, hi, Monica, did you see this? Oh, this is exciting. Oh, this is interesting. It's, having them top of mind as well. And, to this day, I remember her birthday and I send her a card every birthday. It's a two-way street is all I'm trying to say.
Yeah, it really is. And we need to overcome that hesitation of asking for help or even offering, both of those things.
I agree, but I'm going to add one more thing. Sometimes I didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't know what the help I needed to ask for. So I wouldn't ask because I didn't know what to ask for. And even that, I wish I was courageous enough to say, I know that there's more than I need to know, but I don't know what it is. Can you just give a brain dump? Can you download what you think is important for success in this position? Like things like that would be, or you've seen me this is something I have done late in life, but I have done. Oh, you've seen me for 2 or 3 years in this position. What are areas you think I need to work on to grow?
Frequently in job interviews or when they're asking for recommendations, they'll ask, what are some of the things that this individual needs to work on a little bit? And I'm on a job when I'm referring someone, I'm hesitant to say anything about that. I say,
Yeah.
I'm not going to say anything here, but you know what? I am going to tell that person I'm recommending that they asked that, and this is kind of what I thought of they might
That's
think about.
awesome feedback to do. That's great.
That's a good way to do it. Two really quick questions. One of them is Dr. Ana Nogales, who's with us. Thank you, Dr. Nogales. She reminded us that social media today is a great way to get information out. And it's something we need to learn how to use and use it with individuals who might benefit from the information that we have. Thing number one. Then Dr. Dora Elias McAllister, she said, there are real barriers out there to people getting information and to accessing capital. This is not made up. The data shows that they don't get the information and they don't access the capital. This is real. How do we change that? And we've kind of been talking about it, but do you have other ideas at this time?
Well, I do think that there are some opportunities with chambers, with CDFIs, with MDIs, Minority Depository Institutes, credit unions. These are the places. The thing is there's not a push, it's a pull, right? You have to know that you want that and then go find it. And I haven't seen a lot of organizations, even those, reaching in to community. So I'm on the board of Camino Financial or Camino Capital, which is run by Sean Salas, and it's a fintech company. And they give loans to micro enterprise, very small loans and solo entrepreneurs, and mostly serve Latinos, almost exclusively, not totally. And one of the things they're doing is looking to see if they can find partnerships with some of the, public housing institutions, and doing like cafecitos or little cafes, like charlas. So the problem is this kind of work is high touch. It's really high touch. It takes a lot. I mean, to do that, imagine just going place after place after place. But I do think that's part of what's required. And we do rely on social media. Thank you for bringing that up. But, and I think it's a great way. It is a great way to reach Latinos who over-index on mobile phone usage. So it has to be that kind of social communication, right? But I don't know. I don't have the perfect answer for that, but I do think that there are attempts, and I do think there are some organizations, out there doing it. I'll tell you, one of the forums we did, we wanted to do a social media campaign called 1 million to a million, which was an attempt to get 1 million Latino entrepreneurs to $1 million in revenue or more. And it was going to be this whole big social media campaign, and get a lot of buzz around that, and get stars and who have companies featured, and then talk about even and regular people, entrepreneurs as well, talk about where they got their capital and what they learned and what they saw. And so that was it. It hasn't been funded, and I'm not in the same place anymore to do that, to carry that out. But I thought that was a brilliant idea and a great way to go about it. Just, a really big campaign. And I don't know if you've heard of Hispanic Star, which is another, I think, really interesting organization that's doing a lot of outreach to change the perception and dialogue around Latino contributions. And they have some really big reach as well, especially on social. So I think those kinds of organizations, I don't know. That's the best I can do on that one. It's a conundrum.
Well, it is obvious that we could go on and on and on. Abigail, did I get it right? Abigail?
Yeah,
I did it, Abigail.
If you break it up, Abby.
Yes. Abigail.
Yes.
Yes. And we could talk all night. You are just such a pleasure to interact with, to learn from. And I hope that there will be many more opportunities for us to have these dialogues like this. And we look forward to the next time.
Thank you. so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And on the social media thing, thank you for the course that you're doing. Something I need to learn about. So I really appreciate that, how to understand social media and online presence is, and thanks for all you do. Really appreciate it and appreciate the opportunity to have this charla with you.
Well, I know you're in the middle of a summit, and thank you for taking time from that to share with us here today. And Comadres, I want to acknowledge that without Maria Ferrer, we probably wouldn't be here. As you all know, she just puts things on the table and we do them. Comadre Maria, mil gracias. Comadre Eileen, you have been just such a joy to work with and helping us to build the speakers platforms, and we are so grateful to you. And to all of you, Comadres, we couldn't do it without you. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a wonderful evening, everyone. Thank you so much.
Everyone, have a great evening.